What's up, Metal Gear fans? Simon here. Welcome to HannaTalk. Hope you're all doing fantastic during this time. And today I'm here with a very special guest star. Now, he is an actor who's best known to fans as the voice of Psycho Mantis from the Metal Gear Solid series, but he's also played across a variety of characters in series such as M.A.S.K, Beetleborgs Metallics, Naruto, Eureka 7, One Punch Man, Kill la Kill, and many, many more. Please welcome the amazing Doug Stone.
Please, the applause is deafening. Hold it down, everybody. Hold it down.
That if this was actually a TV show, they'd be applauding like absolutely crazy at this point. How are you?
Considering the times that we live in, I'm doing fine. Thank you. Yourself?
I'm doing very well, thank you, especially during this time. Now, I know that because of like what's been happening in the news at the moment with the virus and everything, especially with regards to voice actors and animators at this point, during this time with the virus kind of grinding things to a halt, how have you been keeping up with on the voice acting side of things?
Well, for me, I'm not doing as much. Some of the other actors are. I do have a. We are now performing from home, so I did some ebooks, children's ebooks from home, and I've in the past done commercials and audiobooks from home. But doing dubbing from home is a whole other animal. And at this point, I'm not set up for it with all the equipment that is required to actually dub anime from home. And I haven't, I admit, been in a huge rush to get myself on board. So some of the actors are still working and going through the learning curve of working from home. I'm doing a little bit less, but I'm not stressing about it at this point.
That's fantastic, and I definitely agree. I mean, that's fantastic. You've been keeping up on on the voice acting side of things, on that part with ebooks and commercials and all that. And of course, like many of us, it will eventually get back into a normal swing of things, really. So, absolutely,
Yeah, and hopefully sooner than later. But it just is, of course, impossible to predict at this time how long
absolutely,
we're looking at before I can step in. Excuse me. Before I can step into a studio with an engineer and a director and all the act. Usually they're pretty crowded places. So it may be a while yet before we can do that. I was scheduled to dub something. One of the studios did a test of my equipment from their studio to my computer, and they say that they thought that I would be able to dub, but we haven't scheduled it yet. I'll find out once we do that show, which I'm not allowed to talk about.
of course.
They always have you do non-disclosures for current projects. But once we attempt to dub that, then I'll find out whether I'm really capable of continuing to do more work from home.
Uh,
I'm comfortable engineering from home because I've been doing stuff from here for years. But dubbing is, again, much more complex.
Of course, and that's fantastic, and definitely get. Well, obviously, well, looking forward to hearing like the next few projects you got coming up on that part. Now, right into talking about your career, how did you get started in acting?
Well, ever since I was a kid, I was doing amateur theater. I was very interested in acting, but I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. And in my generation growing up, unlike now where there is a lot of animation work done in Canada, at that time there was little to no chance of earning a living in the entertainment business. The only people who earned a meager living were the Shakespearean actors, the ones who were doing Stratford. We have a Stratford in Canada like they do in Britain. And the people doing classical theater, some of them could eke out a living and live in a tiny apartment, and that was about it. So I just did it as an amateur. I would do theater periodically, directed a few things here and there, but never thought I could earn a living. It wasn't until I was working a straight. I've been working since I was 16, full time, and I was working a straight job, what I'll call a 9 to 5. And they said, "Hey, we need somebody to do some voiceover." This company was doing associated with an American company that did Jello commercials, which Bill Cosby was doing. And they said, "We need someone to do scratch tracks. In other words, just a rough track for timing for these commercials." So I auditioned. There was no pay, but I thought this will be fun. It'll get me away from the desk. I ended up doing more and more of them, and then they started to hire me and actually pay me within the company to do work for them, doing these commercials. And that gave me the idea that if at that point I was doing a lot of theater at night, doing both plays and doing improvisational comedy. I'd studied at Second City in Toronto and did a lot of comedy work. And I thought, if I could actually get money doing voice work, doing commercials,
Mm-hmm.
and equity theater, maybe I could just eke out a living. And I don't care if I earn a lot of money, but if I could just do what I love for a living, wouldn't that be like everybody's dream? Wouldn't that be amazing? So I took the shot. I got encouragement to do so, made a demo tape, ended up getting a small client and started doing some commercials for a mall. Got my own theater troupe together doing equity work, and between those things and other little gigs I picked up, I was able, after a year of effort, with my meager savings that I quit with, I was able to actually earn a living, again, a very meager living, but earn a living within the first year of attempting that. And then it just built from there. I got my equity card in theater. I got my ACTRA card, which is the professional union in Canada, ACTRA, ACTRA. It's like having a SAG or AFTRA card. I'm not sure what the equivalent is where you are, but I'm sure it's something akin to that. Anyway, just built that up and eventually got my union cards in both and started to earn a reasonable living. That was
Fantastic.
sort of the beginnings.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely amazing on that. And who would you consider, like, who or what inspired you to go into acting, and who would you consider to be your biggest influences?
Oh, well, all the actors, I'm probably much older than you. I was influenced by people like Sir Alec Guinness, a British actor. In Canada, we got a lot of British films. We saw a lot of BBC and British films. And we saw Alan Bates and these early actors of the 60s, late 50s, and through the 60s. So they were a big influence on me. I fell in love with Akira Kurosawa films. He's a Japanese director,
Mm,
and there was an actor that he used all the time. I'll probably pronounce this wrong. Toshiro Mifune. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the Japanese name correctly, but he was somebody else that I greatly admired. And of course, as a kid, I was listening to Mel Blanc all the time, but I never dreamt that I would ever be able to do cartoon work. That was just something that happened in Hollywood. But I was primarily watching stage actors. I'd go to Shakespearean plays, and I'd save the whatchamacallits, the programs, and I'd
programs.
circle the
Mm,
actors I liked, like kids would circle, save baseball cards. I saved theater programs, and I'd
wow.
circle who my favorite actors were and try to find out more about them, et cetera, et cetera. So it was something that always fascinated me. And I was also writing in school. I was always writing a little plays and stories and things to entertain people. Uh, so it was sort of in my blood from the time I was young, but a lot of different influences. Then once I got into voiceover, I started to listen more carefully to the Frank Welkers and the Mel Blancs and the others whose footsteps I began to, as best I could, follow in.
Fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic that you got so many influences from a whole variety of actors, from obviously mentioning about Alec Guinness, who I'm familiar with from the Star Wars universe, as well as from
Ah,
Lawrence of Arabia, but also
yeah,
from the Japanese filmmaker, which I obviously can't remember the name just there, but from what I've heard
yeah.
about that one, he was the man that I think a lot of the inspiration for Star Wars came from, I think, in based of the films that he did. Like a lot of the
Uh,
samurai.
yes,
Yes, that's right. So,
actually, a bunch of cowboy films that starred Clint Eastwood and others were all based on his. The Magnificent Seven was based on the Seven Samurai. The early Clint Eastwood movies were based on Yojimbo and maybe Rashomon became a film with Paul Newman. He was influenced by American directors, and then when American directors looked at his films, he was doing a lot of samurai films, samurais being warriors
mm,
who use swords, and a lot of the directors said, "Hey, this could translate into the American idiom of cowboys." So, and then Star Wars, I think, was based on Hidden Castle, I believe. It was
yes,
called something like that. So, yeah, he was a huge influence on Scorsese and Sergio Leone and a lot of directors. And I believe he was eventually given an honorary Academy Award, if not for, or he might have won one for Ron, Best Foreign Film. Can't recall. But anyway, highly acknowledged later in his career by American directors.
Absolutely, and he still continues to be a huge influence
Yes.
across a whole variety of films, but still within the Star Wars universe, for that matter, because of the new projects they're working on at the moment, like with the Mandalorian series, which they've acknowledged a lot of, still acknowledging a lot of the Japanese work that have inspired the
Mm.
series, as well as a lot of the Western work at that time. So it's absolutely fantastic that he still has that influence over so many people at that point, which is amazing. Now, going
He
into
was incredible. He was incredible. If you look at his films, with just the camera, the structure of both the story and also the way he shot his films, they're
hmm,
like paintings. It's really quite something to go back and I know they're dated and they're black and white, but there's I think at least if you're interested in film, they're worth going back and looking at.
absolutely, that's fantastic. Now you played across as from a variety of roles, from plays over to cartoons and anime. Are all the roles that you've done in the past audition based?
No, no, not always. And certainly initially it was auditioning, and then you usually, if you succeed in your career, you'll get to a point where sometimes you're simply cast. You're simply invited to play a role in something. And so my work now is probably half and half. Uh, where well, maybe it's 60% auditions again because I don't do as much. So some of the younger directors don't know me, but by the early 2000s, probably the majority of my work was non-audition and just being asked to come in. And also, I do work that you wouldn't know about. I don't know if you know what looping is on TV shows and films. It's providing voices for television shows and films.
Ah,
Nobody
yes.
nobody speaks in those except the lead actors. All the other voices are supplied by voice actors.
Right, right. That's
And I
fantastic.
and I've done over 1,000 TV shows and films. And I also had my own group and won several awards. Are you familiar with the Hercules and Xena shows from the 90s?
Yes, yes. Xena Warrior
Okay,
Princess with Lucy Lawless, I believe.
exactly. And
Yes.
Kevin Sorbo and Hercules. Well, my group did all those shows. There was about
Wow.
225. We supplied the voices for all the villagers, all the monsters, all the everything that wasn't them. Was us. Was myself and a group of actors.
Fantastic. And I am familiar with like some voice actors like getting I think like some really high notable voice actors getting cast in such big productions, but are sort of uncredited at that point. I think it was during the film Shazam, which was DC's last film with Zachary Levi and Mark Strong. I think when they did the Seven Deadly Sins, I found out that some of the voice actors in that production were Fred Tastacore, I think, who's a really notable
Hmm.
voice actor, and Stephen Bloom were actually a couple of the Seven Deadly Sins of that project.
Right.
But I didn't know that personally at the time until I had to look it up and went like, wow, this is fantastic. So I have become familiar with some voice actors, really notable voice actors in the industry, being cast in roles that even though they're uncredited for during those productions, it's still fantastic to hear them in roles like this. So
Well,
yeah.
it's also it pays their rent. When you loop, bear in mind that anime, as much as the fans love it, pays very little for the actors. It's one of the lowest paying jobs in voiceover is anime, dubbing, live action or anime. But looping, like Steve, I've known Steve since he first got in the business. Used to hire him and directed him. Uh, but guys like Steve Bloom, when you get into an original animation series or looping, that's when you start getting residuals.
Wow.
When you loop on a TV show or film, you essentially get the day rate, almost the same rate as a guest star would get. If they were just, somebody came on to do a few lines in a show, they weren't a star, they get paid X amount of money and then they get residuals with every replay. But when you loop, the same thing happens. I'm still getting residuals. For instance, I had to imitate an Australian. I do accent work, and I had to imitate. I was doing a film called Return to the Blue Lagoon many
Y-
years ago,
yes, yes, that's right.
and the captain of the ship was Australian, and they wanted somebody to voice match him. And that I did audition for and got, and I ended up doing one word for the captain, imitating his voice, and I still get residuals for that.
Fantastic.
So it's an odd business. Sometimes you'll do an anime or a game and scream until you can't talk for 2 days, but you won't get paid as much as if you looped for 2 hours on a TV show or film. You get a lot of odd experiences. I worked with Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman directed a film called Nil by Mouth, which was really about working class guys in bars in the UK. And he said, I don't want any American, he did it here in LA. He said, I don't want any American actors. I only want working class Brits to come in and loop, to do all the voice work. That's being every guy in the bar and every guy in the street. Well, they panicked because they couldn't find experienced guys who could do the lip sync work that was required. The voice replacement was required. So there was 4 or 5 actual Brits and myself and another actor named Randy, and we were told we had to be working class Brit for the whole day, and we couldn't let him know. We couldn't let Gary know that we weren't for real, right? Well, so we had to talk like this the whole time. I never spilled the beans to Gary that we wasn't working class, and which did not make me comfortable for the day. So what Randy and I did was acted like we were very shy every time he turned to speak to us, and so he got used to that he couldn't interact with us because we were afraid he'd ask us questions that we couldn't answer. We
Right.
didn't live in the UK, and and all the vernacular and the geography and current events and whatever. So we stay in the back as much as we could, but every time there was something difficult to do, from the booth they'd say, Randy, could you get this? And Randy would do it, or I would do it. Gary kept looking like, who are these 2 guys? They do the difficult work, but they're too shy to talk to me. But he let it go. And anyway, to this day, I don't think he knows that we weren't working class Brits. So you get some strange things that happen.
Wow, that's
I was
fantastic.
directed by Mel Brooks. Directed me in a dubbing project. I mean, all these odd things that happen to you in the business once you're in LA, or I guess New York too, but certainly in Los Angeles.
That's fantastic. And you never know. Maybe the next project they work on with Gary Oldman, he'll probably like they'll hopefully that will come to he'll start realizing, oh yeah, he'll probably start to ask you about that or something. That would be hilarious if that
Well,
happened.
it's kind of surprising because he does an American accent and thinks nothing of it. He's not, he doesn't, I'm sure doesn't feel anybody's offended, and he does a great job. So I don't know why he would care that much, but he wanted authenticity, 100% authenticity, and unfortunately, they couldn't give him that. Plus, give him 2 experienced people in the room. I didn't want to do it. I told the person who went to hire me, I don't want to go in because I don't want to have to try to fool Gary Oldman all day. That makes me
Mm,
uncomfortable. But I was kind of told, look, we've hired you a lot, and if you want to keep working, you'll do it. So I was kind of blackmailed, and we both were very uncomfortable, but
mm.
we did it.
But I think definitely the good side on this sort of part is like as you said before, you're getting obviously money like a fair bit of money out of this out of these projects, but you're also getting to work like and be like have the experience alongside these huge name actors and people within the
Mm-hmm.
industry. So I think I see that as a plus. So I think that's
Oh,
just fan
absolutely. I'm thrilled that I got to work with him. I've gotten to meet some interesting people, and Gary Oldman is like absolutely giant actor, amazing actor. So yeah, I was thrilled to be standing in a room with him working. Was a great honor just to be in the room with him and acting, even though it was voice acting.
mm,
It was still thrilling, but
absolutely.
scary too.
Absolutely, and that's just fantastic. Now, with every kind of project that you've worked on, for that matter, do you walk into a series or a project expecting to like especially if it's a major role, expecting to play a certain role, or is it just like a jack in the box? You just don't know what to expect.
Oh well, you're cast before you go in. If we're talking about animation and anime and games and whatever, you know what you're playing before you go in. The audition process takes now that it used to be that you'd go into audition. Now, 80% of the time you audition from home. I'm
Wow.
set up here with a microphone and I have soundproofing and people have booths and whatever. So they send me the material and sometimes they'll send me a clip from the show if it's dubbing so that I can see the original,
Hmm.
whether it's Spanish, Japanese, live action, a Netflix show, an anime show. I'll view that and then I'll audition, record myself and edit it, send that in, and that's what they'll base it on, and then bring you in. Once in a while you'll go in and they'll change it, but ordinarily, most of the time, you play what you audition for. In
Right.
most cases, once in a while you'll go in and they'll say, you know what? Now that we've got you here and we're listening to you, we'd rather have you play Joe instead of Fred, and it might switch on you last minute like that. But generally, if you're being cast, if you're auditioning, generally it's done from home.
Right. That's fantastic. Now, going across into like obviously you played mentioned about before with like playing like a whole variety of roles and all that kind of stuff. Have you ever turned down a role for any particular reason?
Yes. There's a form of animation that's called, I can't pronounce it, henai?
Uh, I think it's pronounced hentai. I think that's what it's pronounced as.
Hentai?
I think it's
Uh,
hentai. Yes.
yeah, I was offered that, and I looked at the footage and saw an octopus raping a woman and said, no, thank you.
Oh,
There's things that are offensive to me that I find offensive. I understand it's fictionalized. I understand it's a cartoon, but I do believe that violence begets violence to a certain extent. So I know in the games, there's certain games that I wouldn't do if they're just completely bloodthirsty. If all it is senseless killing, I'm not interested. If
mm,
there's a hero, I understand it's mythological that a bad guy does something, a hero pulls out his sword or his gun or his magic weapon, and he does battle. We see that from all through history in stories in every culture, and that's it permeates its way into what we do now in anime and games, and I get it, and I'm fine with that. But not senseless violence, not violence against children or women, not what I consider to be just encouraging uh, what I consider disgusting behavior. So, uh, yeah, that kind of project I don't do.
I think that's fantastic that you see it in that kind of sense, and that's absolutely true because I mean there have been several anime series, as far as I know, over the years where they've pushed it to like crazy circumstances. But if they were to put that in a dubbing situation, it would just be too much for general audiences. That's why you've seen, like, for example, a lot of projects from Funimation, for example. I think they ended up turning down, I think, one project that they were supposed to dub originally because it was just against like their code of conduct. It was just against what
Good.
they would give off to a general audience. So it's
Well, good for them. Most
absolutely.
studios, if they're being conscientious, most studios, when they send you material, will say this contains a certain amount of violence or a certain amount of sexuality or whatever. And that's great. And then I'll just write back and say, can you explain to me what you mean by that? Is it violence that they're fighting monsters? Is it sexuality in that two willing people who are of age have a sex scene together? I mean, I don't find any of that objectionable. It's normal and what happens in real life. So, but I do appreciate them giving me a heads up so that I can ask and find out more about it. And in most cases, I don't find it objectionable, but I'm thrilled that they gave me that option and gave me that information.
That's absolutely fantastic, and I think it's really great to see that a lot of voice actors that dub over series like this are able to have that choice, and because that's giving it us to us as the fans who are fans of these series for that matter. Because whenever I watch like an anime series myself, I watch into it for a story and all that kind of stuff. If I see something that is quite grotesque or anything that
Mm-hmm.
like is left of center against the norm, I'd say, nope, I'm not watching that.
Yeah.
It's just horrible. Because and like I'm absolutely nothing against any of absolutely nothing against any of the people that has made these series or anything like that, or of course to people that to Japanese culture, of course, in that sense. But to me, it's like no, I'm not watching this. It's like
Yeah.
I definitely agree on that. Now,
Yeah. I understand that different cultures and they do it, but I have to honor my own culture, my own morality, and be able to sleep at night. So I take that stance. I've been a businessman in this business. I had a loop group, and I used to direct and whatever. Every actor who ever worked for me was paid. Everybody was treated properly. I don't do certain types of work. I just believe I have my own moral code, which I follow, and which makes me comfortable, and that just my way. And I get it. If an actor's starving to death and they go do hentai or whatever, then what am I? Who am I to say? Maybe they have a family to feed. It's not like I'm sitting here judging others, but I can control what I do at least.
I think that's absolutely fantastic, and I think hats off to you and to all the actors, to everybody out there that has this stance on that. And I think it's true. Everyone needs to have a stance on this. But as you said before, like there obviously will come a time that maybe they'll have to do this because of X this sort of reason in that fact. But I say hats off to you for having those convictions. So
Well, thank you. Just it isn't even something that I have to question myself about. I just it's a knee-jerk reaction. I was once looping on a movie. I didn't know anything about it. I was just brought in to provide voices, and I could see very quickly that it was a murder thing and a crazy, like they do with these films, somebody crazy and he's slaughtering people. But it got worse and worse as it went on, and he was only slaughtering women, and it was getting really sickening. But I've already committed. I'm there on the, it's a union project. I can't walk out. And at the end of it, the killer walks off into the sunset. And the producer happened to be there, and I said, I was expecting him to get some horrible death, his comeuppance at the end. I was
mm,
expecting some sort of justice or something. He said, oh, no, I want to keep him around for in case I do a sequel.
wow.
So I just went to the person who hired me, and I said, I'm very grateful that you hired me, but right now I feel sick to my stomach. I'm worried I'm going to have nightmares tonight. Please, I'd like to work for you again, but I cannot work in a project like this again. I'm sorry. If that means you can't hire me at all, so be it. But please never bring me in on something like this again, because it's diabolically, it's sickening. All it is a slaughter fest. It's just a slasher slaughter fest, and I
Mm.
don't watch those, and I don't wish to participate in them. So
I think.
I did get caught once where I did act in something I objected to, but
Mm.
I was stuck.
I think that's fantastic that you, and I think that's absolutely fantastic in that. And as I said, hats off to you for doing that, really. So that's really great to hear, and hope, and of course, looking forward to like projects where that are stuck within your convictions on that. So absolutely fantastic. Now, speaking about, of course, with anime, like as we all know, the anime is of course based on manga. Have you ever read the manga for any anime series that you've worked on, or ever become familiar or heard of a project that you've worked on before you started working on that series?
No, because I'm not of that generation. When I was working in the voiceover, I was doing original animation. We were dubbing usually foreign films, uh, uh, Italian, Spanish, etc. Some Spanish cartoons, and then suddenly, and at this point, I'm already in my God. How old was I? I was probably 40, maybe. When suddenly a Japanese cartoon appeared, and they told me it's called anime. I said, "Oh, say that again." Anime. I've never heard that word. So it was brand new to me, not part of my generation. I had no experience with it. I educated myself as to the history of anime a little bit and tried to understand the presentation, acting style, etc. Since initially I was directing this project. Uh, I forget what Alma Wind of Light or something it was called. I forget. Do you know who Kevin Seymour is? Uh,
Kevin Seymour. I think I may have heard the name from somewhere.
Okay, well, I'm trying to remember the company he was with. He did a lot of well-known stuff, but this was an early project of his before he started directing his own work at Magnitude 8 Studio. He did a lot, I can't think of the titles now, but a lot of famous titles. Anyway, um, that's how I got into anime. So I wasn't really familiar with the background about manga or anything. It was just to me another project, but I just had to learn a little bit more about the background. Same as if I was, for a while, I had my own company and I was doing the early Jackie Chan pictures. My Harvest, what were they called? I can't, Harvest Moon, I think it was. A Chinese company had hired
Mm.
me and I was dubbing their movies and doing Jackie Chan pictures. So I had to learn about Jackie Chan and learn about the background. So it was the same thing with the anime, just had to learn about it. But I can't say that I won't, some actors my age go to conventions, and I'm sorry they're lying, and tell you about how much they love anime. I'm telling you, they don't go home and watch anime. They go home and take care of their grandkids. But I'm not an anime fan particularly. There's some anime I like, but I'm not of that generation. I'm of the Warner Brothers, Mel Blanc, Bugs Bunny generation.
Wow. That's fantastic. And it's funny that you mentioned about, of course, with when you were mentioning about, of course, with the anime side of things, there was a quote that I think I once heard from Stephen Bloom said that he's considered by fans as the king of anime, even though, ironically enough, I think he said that he was not a fan of the style itself, but he does appreciate it for what it
Yeah.
is. So it's kind of funny looking at the irony of that. So
I suppose so. Yeah. Well, Stephen, he's a terrific guy, and he's a very honest man. Stephen, I've known him, as I say, since before he got in the business. I was working for people that he originally worked for when he was trying to break in, and then I hired him near the beginning of his career as well. And it was very obvious how talented he was. Very nice, very real and grounded guy. So I'm proud that he would tell the truth like that and wouldn't tell stories. But yeah, he's younger than I am, but also I think of the generation. Uh, when I met him, he already had children. He's not of the generation that was raised on anime. There are some shows I like. I'm trying to remember what it's called. Just looking at this poster, there was one where I think it was called Kill something.
Kill a Kill.
There's some that really make me laugh. There was one where I played a doctor who wore a mask all the time, and there was a head that had been stolen. Um, I can't remember the title of it offhand, but I quite enjoyed that one. There's some of them that I really do get a kick out of if they're clever, if they're funny, if they have a skewed sense of humor to them.
Mm,
Particularly if they're funny or dark, or if they really go off the beaten path.
mm,
Then I can enjoy them more. But if they're straight up adventure type things, it's just not my thing, really.
mm. That's fantastic.
Same as I will cop to, I'm not a Star Wars or Star Trek fan either. So there you go.
That's absolutely no problem at all. And to each their own, really. So
Yeah,
now
but
going.
it doesn't mean, of course, that when I'm in front of the microphone and they give me that character, I completely commit to that character and to being as real and truthful, his truth, find that character's truth, and there's no disdain in the performance. I want to give the best, do the best possible job every time out. Whether I'm going to watch the project or not is not, that doesn't come into play at all. Whether I'm ever going to see it or not doesn't matter. I was saying, like with Psycho Mantis, I've never played, I don't play games. I've never played one of those games. Um, I had no idea what would happen with Psycho. I just knew it was a cool role, and I was going to commit to it 100%. It was fun playing a villain because I've been playing a lot of heroes before that. And it was just a total shock to me when it took off and it became slightly iconic. Was great. All I know when I'm in front of the microphone with a script is 100% commitment. Every role you play, no matter what it pays and what it is, if you commit to doing it, you give it everything you've got, 100%. Don't be dishonest to yourself. Don't be dishonest to the audience. Don't be dishonest to the people who hired you.
Absolutely, that's just fantastic. And speaking about, of course, with Psycho Mantis, as you mentioned with before, which is, of course, your best-known role from the Metal Gear Solid series, what was it
Right.
like playing that character and in the world of Metal Gear?
Well, and actually, it's not. It may be the best known. There's also Matt Tracker from the M.A.S.K. I did 65 original animation episodes in the 80s. The series called Mobile Armored Strike Command. I played 8 characters, and there are still fan clubs around the world that contact me, whatever. So that's also apparently quite iconic. But the
Mm,
world of the Psycho, you go in by yourself. You're not with the other actors, which you are with original animation, but you're not with them on anime, and you're not with them usually in games. So I went in on my own with only the script, the portion of the script that I was in. The director gives you some background, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 minutes of background on the series to give you some idea of what kind of a world you're in and what you're about, maybe background on your character if you haven't already gotten some at the audition process. And then you fly by the seat of your pants from there, and it's you and the director, and you're counting on them to steer you right as to the character's intent, etc. And then your job, of course, is to lift it off the page and make it come alive.
that's fantastic, and I think that's definitely true. That's amazing. Now, of course, the Metal Gear franchise has been going on for such a very long time, since 1987. Excuse me. Will we hope to see you come back into that world, into the Metal Gear franchise?
It's not a decision I make. I did do more than one. I think I did three. Um, the third of which I think was primarily flashbacks. I'd be happy to reprise him. One thing Psycho did do a few years ago was a series of car commercials, of all things, that probably only played in the States. Um, so he was reprised to do car commercials, which was very odd. You can
Wow.
find them. You can find them online on YouTube. Uh,
Fantastic.
if you look up Psycho Mantis car, probably you might be able to find them. And they've taken original footage from Metal Gear that they paid for, and then I went in and revoiced Psycho. Except now he's saying, "I can read your mind. You want to buy this car." But as for the very odd, it was great because it gave me some unexpected money. I do volunteer work with animals, and it gave me some unexpected money. So I wrote a check for $1,000 to the shelter to help the animals. So it was great. Nice little
Wow.
windfall. But as far as the franchise goes, they have complete power. The actor has no power over reprising roles. That's strictly up to the producers, the writers, etc. If they were to call me, I'd be happy to go back. But as of this point, that has not happened.
Right. But that's fantastic if it does happen. So, and now speaking about, of course, you mentioned, of course, with the Mask series, where you played various characters from in that series, from Matt Tracker to Max Mayhem. What was it like playing in that series?
Oh, a lot of fun. That was my intro to LA. I had been, again, I was back in Toronto and I was doing on camera work. I'd grown my career from stage and a little bit of voiceover to an on camera acting on low budget, straight to video in those days, features in the early 1980s. The cinematographer recommended me to a really good agent in Toronto because he felt I was good. They signed me on, and about 7 or 8 months later, the M.A.S.K auditions hit, and it was going to be a collaboration of a French, an American, and a Canadian company. So they wanted Canadian actors. So I auditioned in Toronto many times over with the LA people over the phone in studio because they hadn't met me. But based on the auditions and callbacks, they said, "Okay, you got the role. You'll be Matt Tracker and two other characters." And I came to LA, where I've been to LA many times before, but not to live. I came down, and those three characters grew into 8 characters, and it grew into 65 episodes. It was great. We did record in a group. I'm still friends with almost all of the cast. Most of them still live in LA. So we've been friends since 1985, which is a good long time. And it was a lot of fun. It was great, and it got me to LA. From there, I was able to get agency representation, and was told by the studio and other people, "Hey, you're good enough to work in LA," which I had never even aspired to. I didn't
Wow.
think that I could ever have a career here in the epicenter of voiceover. But they said, "You're good enough," so I took the chance and used the money to fund staying in LA, and continued doing theater and auditioning for on camera, but primarily pushing the voiceover career. And then that's what became, by 1989 or 90, it was all voiceover, and I'd stopped doing theater and stopped auditioning for on camera, and just was because at that point I was also directing and also adapting scripts for dubbing, etc., etc. So on it went. But M.A.S.K was very affectionate about M.A.S.K because it was my launching pad in LA.
That's fantastic, and that's absolutely amazing on that fact as well. Now, you also got to play in a series called Beetleborgs Metallics, Big Bad Beetleborgs, around 11 years later as
Yes.
Dragonborg. What was it like playing in that series?
Oh, well, that was Saban. Saban produced that, the same company that did the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Um, so I was working for Saban when they were a tiny little company. They actually wrote the music for the M.A.S.K show, and then began to buy footage that they could dub, etc. So I'd known them from the beginning. So I was adapting some of those scripts for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, doing guest bits, guest monsters and stuff, or whatever. But because it was dubbing, I was doing less and less of it because I was moving into looping world, which paid better at that time. Um, so I can't say that anything particularly stood out. I directed at Saban. I produced at Saban. I directed their first original animation series, Little Mouse on the Prairie. So it was just part and parcel. I was working 14, 16-hour days, 7 days a week at that time because I had incorporated and had my own company. So I was just working nonstop. So Beetleborg was just one job out of maybe four that I was doing that day. So there's no particular memory that I can point to except that I know all those guys who were directing it. It's a lot of old friends is the primary memory that I have. That it was being directed by Scott Page and other folks that I still know to this day.
That's fantastic.
But we just goofed. I'd go in there and I was goofing around, and one time I was doing a Sean Connery imitation. He said, "That's good. Do it for one of the monsters." I think that was for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I said, "Seriously, for a monster?" "Sure. It's been a long time since I've done Sean. Jesus Christ. Arigato gozaimasu, round eyes. So, one of the monsters in Metal Gear, in Mighty Morphin sounds a little bit like Sean Connery. I believe that's I guy, if I recall correctly." So we were doing all kinds of weird shit, just to, pardon my language, just to amuse ourselves in those days, just to be wacky.
That's fantastic, and that's absolutely fantastic that you've had that, as you mentioned about before with Saban, which of course was responsible for the Power Rangers series, that you've
Yeah.
had so many experience through that company that helped to bring like that sort of series to life, as well as the series that came after that as well during that period, which is fantastic. So yeah. Now,
Well, yeah, I was involved at the beginning of all that, the beginning of Mighty Morphin and all that. But again, then my career path changed somewhat, so I got in there less. But for a while, I was never an employee of Saban, but they hired I think, well, maybe they did hire some on staff, but there was about 4 or 5 of us who directed for them. And
right.
then, and then I got associate producer credits for a couple of shows that I had done for them as well. But then, as I say, I've moved on to other things. It was just a period in my career where things were just gold, and as I say, there wasn't enough hours in the day to do everything. Back in the from 1989 to 99 or 2000, was just always on the go.
Right. That's fantastic. And that's really great to hear on that. Now, speaking about, of course, with video games, now over the last year, due to the success of the Sonic the Hedgehog film, in a way breaking the video game film curse, would you want to see any of the video game projects that you worked on yourself turn into a live action film? And what has been your opinion on video games being adapted for live action?
I don't know that I'm really equipped to speak to it because I'm not fan based, because I'm not coming from the same place as probably a lot of your listeners who play the games and are more invested in them. Uh, they have stronger opinions about what. It's like when I look at a Kurosawa film, my generation, and see them adapted to Western films. I have strong opinions about what they put in and what they didn't, and what they left out, what I didn't like about what they changed, because that speaks to me in my generation. But I can't really speak to that as well as somebody younger than me. I think it's great that these franchises have a life. If they have a fan base, then it's terrific if they can keep them going in different genres. The problem, of course, always is can they please everybody?
Hmm.
Um, for years, they've talked about M.A.S.K coming back, either with a G.I. Joe or as a live action film. And they tried rekindling M.A.S.K, and they made my character, instead of an older white guy who's got blonde hair, 6'6", and shoulders as wide as Montana, they had him as a young black kid. And that didn't fly. They kept trying to modernize it. And change it and find new ways to appeal to a different audience. So it's going to please some people and it's not going to please others. I
Hmm.
had no objection because I don't own the series, and I get that things change and they morph and they alter with different generations. So fans were saying, "Oh, are you upset that they're not casting you, or they've changed the character of Matt Tracker?" And no, it's theirs. It belongs to them. They
Hmm.
can do whatever they want. I just don't know whether it'll work or not. But uh, it's theirs to experiment with, I guess.
I definitely agree on that, and you definitely hear a lot about with a lot of voice actors for that matter that are invested in projects like that, or especially for example like an actor like John St. John for example, who is known for playing in the video game universe. I think as Duke Nukem. I think he was best known for
Oh,
playing it. He was, I think, when the reports were going about that they were going to do a live action Duke Nukem game, which is a franchise that he's been heavily invested in for most of his career and that he's become well known for. I think he spoke up very highly about them turning that into a live action film because of how long he's been playing that character. So you're obviously going to run into a lot of fans that object to video games or especially anime being adapted for live action, but you also see that in the actors as well, which is I
Yeah.
think, but I have to give props to anybody out there that attempts to adapt like anime or video games into that world. It's just really a matter of like obviously respecting the source material, and I think just keeping true to what the source material is really.
Well, that's my feeling about it. Again, I don't have a strong investment in it, but I do feel when I get asked about Mask, that's when I go back to a source material. Uh, my stance is, look, you built a fan base on a particular style
Mm,
with particular voices or actors or whatever it may be that people fell in love with. To take it and then revamp it entirely feels like to the fan base, in part, a betrayal. And also, you're alienating them. So, if it were me, I'm not an owner of any of these, I would stick very close to the original personally. And I would certainly pay an homage to the original. Like they used to have Stan Lee in some of the Marvel movies. And I thought that was a
mm.
great idea. Let Stan Lee have a little, shot and have a line or two in the films. Bow your head, tip your hat to the original. Try to keep some of that original in there, in the meat of everything. That's how I would go with it. If they redid Mask, which they keep talking about, and the fans say, "Oh, you should play it," and I go, "My voice is aged. I'm 35 years older than that. I don't expect them to hire me to play those roles." But I think it would be really cool if they took us, the original cast, and gave us something to do in it. And I think fans would love that and go, "Oh my God, those are the original guys. That's the original woman." And whether it's live action or animated, just a tip of the hat. I think fans get an emotional connection from that. So that's my take. But again, I'm not super invested in it. My job is to do my job the best I can, do my work, and then walk away and let go of it.
I think that's absolutely fantastic, and I definitely see where you're coming from with this, in that fact, because like as you mentioned about before with the Mask series potentially getting a revival, there were also stories about like with because obviously in the last few years we've been getting a lot of revivals of a lot of classic series and anime and even a lot of cartoons as well. So it's totally possible that we'll see a revival of the Mask series at some point in the
Yes, could
future. Absolutely,
happen.
that would be amazing if that were to happen. So now going more into anime, you're also played in the Naruto series. What was it like to step into the world of Naruto?
Well, what blew us away was how it was the never-ending series. I mean, it was incredible that it went on so long. I worked with so many different directors over the length of that show. Incredible that it was so popular that it really captured everybody's imagination. But again, for me, it's almost more like old home week. The particular studio that records in is owned by a guy who used to be with Saban. Some of Saban staff works there. There's engineers that used to work with me when I was directing, engineers that worked with me when I was acting. Whatever. So I walk into that studio that was doing Naruto, and I have to get there early just because I need half an hour to say hello to everybody. So my fondest memories of Naruto are just the people.
Hmm.
That every time I went in there to work, I'd get to see old friends and we'd chat and catch up with each other, etc., etc. And then into the studio, I'd go to do my work. Um, but for me, again, I have to say, because I don't want to be dishonest, it was just another series. I committed to playing the roles, and I was the mean dad, and I was a lot of other peripheral characters. Towards the end, Michael McConaughey, who's a dear friend, had left the city and couldn't continue his role as the sage of the 12 scrolls or something like that. I forget what it's
I
called.
think that's right.
Um,
Yes.
so I took over that role for the last 50 or 60 of the original Naruto's. I ended up doing that role as well. So that was kind of cool. So it was a fun show, and they made it fun for us to work on. Um, but again, I've never seen a full episode. I've only seen the portions that I've worked on. Or once in a while they'd show me something that was fun and say, "Hey, take a look at this," just for something cool to see. But I've never sat down at home and sometimes they're very kind and they give me CDs and copies of things that I've worked on. I rarely look at them unless I've got somebody coming over, a guest who's a younger person. I am friends with people from their 20s up to their 90s. So if I get a younger friend coming over and I'm worried they're bored, I may say, "Do you want to watch some anime?" And I can throw on one, and that's when I get to see it. Because on my own, I don't tend to watch, but I'll throw something on for them to see that was sent to me. Uh,
Wow.
but Naruto, I've never actually watched.
Wow, that's absolutely fantastic. And and of course, well, it's fantastic that of course you get to like show like as you mentioned about before with like expressing your work, the work that you've done through to a lot like younger generations of fans and see the work that you've done in that fact. And of course we currently have the Boruto series, which is looking at the next generation of the series of Naruto. So hopefully we'll get to see you come back into that
Mm-hmm.
world again.
I actually did. I can't remember what I played, but I actually did go back. I've done one or two sessions on the new one, both as a flashback of the dad and I think just a minor role. So I haven't picked up a regular role in that one yet. But it may well happen as it continues on.
Absolutely.
That may occur. But it is a great thrill. Again, I know it sounds odd when I say I don't watch it, but um, I love acting. I love the process of going in and doing the work. So I go in there, I get the script, I get to be something else, somebody else, with a whole different life than my own. I do my performance, I feel really cool. If the director's really happy, I feel good, everybody's pleased with the work. I go home and I get back into my volunteer work with animals and whatever else, that my focus is on. And I don't watch the work. But like one of my volunteer work, I volunteer with kids as young as 18 and I'll bump into some kid and young person, I shouldn't say kid, but some young person, and somebody will say, "Oh, Doug does voice work," and they'll say, "What?" I say, "What do you watch?" They go, "Naruto." I go, "Oh, I'm on that." They go, "Oh my God, that's amazing! You're that character!" And I tell you, it gives me a thrill. Absolutely gives me a thrill to
That
hear that from somebody 50 years younger than me. I'm almost 70 years old. From 50 years younger than me, and they're going, "Oh, you're in that. I know who that character is. Oh, that's so cool. I love what you're doing." I'm thrilled with that. It is definitely a high point when to realize that the work I've done reaches across several generations. And I also
absolutely.
like the ebooks I was doing the other week are for little kids. I love reading stories for children. So some of my work also, some people remember it from when they were 4 or 5 years old. There's an original animation series that I play Speed the Turtle in. Swan Princess is a franchise that started up in the 90s, particularly aimed for young girls. And I'll meet some kids at the animal shelter, and I'll say, "Well, I'm Speed the Turtle in Swan Princess," and I go, "Oh, I watched that when I was 5 years old. Oh my God!" They're like 22 or something, and it just gives me a thrill that it created magic for them when they were babies, when they were little children. That was magical for them, and I was got to be part of the magic of their childhood. That's a gift. That's a gift as far as I'm concerned. That I'm blessed that I could do that and be that.
I absolutely think that's fantastic as well, and I still get the same kind of reaction from like still meeting the voice actors at comic conventions from people that have voiced these characters that I really like in shows that I watch. Even though I do this podcast to like interview a lot of voice actors on this program and like to help support the animation industry and the voice acting industry, I still get a thrill from meeting actors like at comic conventions and such. So I still get that exact same thrill in the same way that you feel when you meet fans that recognize that work. It's just fantastic.
Well, certain fans, I don't think I realized. I have to say, it was silly of me, but because I should have thought about how I felt about Mel Blanc's work, how magical cartoons were to me, the Disney cartoons. But when I was doing it, I just felt like, well, I'm a blue collar guy doing this work, and and I hope I'm doing okay. It just never occurred to me that it would be that special to anyone. And it wasn't until I did a few conventions and then also meeting these young people, and I'd seen emotional reaction from some people about some of the work. And I go,
Wow.
oh my goodness, I didn't realize that what I did touched them emotionally. I, I've had I've had a soldier walk up to me, a guy who was in the armed forces in his 30s, and he walked up to me, and he had been watching the M.A.S.K show when he was a kid, and he was like
Wow.
almost trembling when he met me, and I couldn't understand it. But here's this tough guy. He said, "Well, I came from a broken family, and when I got home from school, I'd put on the M.A.S.K cartoon, and you were like the perfect dad." And I was 6 or 7 or 8 years old, and I'd watch that show and think, I wish I had a dad like Matt Tracker. And he said it gave me a stability in something when I was just a little kid. I almost broke down and cried. It was incredible. So you don't know what your work, who it touches, and so I'm glad I've always treated the work with respect because, yeah, you don't know who it could reach and what it could mean to someone. And that
Absolutely.
is to move someone's heart. That's an incredible thing. It's an incredible gift to be given to be able to lift somebody up, to have your work lift someone's spirits is an amazing and beautiful thing.
Absolutely. That is just fantastic. And that's absolutely fantastic that fans are still able to resonate on with the work that you've done and tell you how much it means to them on how much it really means to them in that fact. And it still resonates even with older fans as well, which is really, really great. Now,
Yeah, this guy was no kid, but he had been this. The show was 1985, so he was born in '78 or something. So when I met him, he was in his 30s. Yeah,
wow.
so
That's
it's
fantastic.
it's across the. And then I meet the Naruto fans who are 20 years old. So it's across the generations.
It's absolutely fantastic in that fact. Now, other anime series that you've also worked in as well. You've also played in Kill the Kill, One
Yeah,
Punch Man, which is now hitting season two. But you've also played across in series such as Hunter x Hunter, the Mobile Suit Gundam series, and the 2016 version of Berserk. What was it like playing across a variety of those shows?
oh well, they're all different kinds of roles. Metal Gear I remember best because I was quite involved. That's when Kevin Seymour um, was. I wish I could remember the name of it. Magnet. No, can't remember the name of his company. But I was helping him cast initially. So a lot of the Metal Gear Solid characters I helped cast in some of those early games that Kevin was doing. So I had sort of an attachment to that. I don't remember Berserk very well. You'd have to refresh my memory. Um, but every role is different. I mean, again, I've literally done thousands of. There was weeks when I was doing 5 or 6 jobs a week at different studios for years. So it's very hard for me to differentiate and remember specific incidents or specific studio times or shows sometimes, unless something interesting happened that made them stand out or something about the show really fascinated me for one reason or another. Um, Gundam was interesting. Gundam did have catch my interest, and it was interesting to work on because I saw anime. Outer space seemed to suit the anime world to me. That seemed like a good fit. So, and I thought it was an interesting premise, the Gundam premise,
Mm.
and the young hero. I had first cast. Oh gosh, he's passed now. Michael, who played the young hero. Um, oh gosh, my memory. But anyway, I had cast the actor who played that young hero
Mm.
in in that show, and so that also gave me sort of a connection to it. But anyway, uh, again, it's very very hard to remember specific anime shows in great detail. I'm afraid because there's been so many of them over the years. Kill the Kill I remember because it was fun. Because I liked the scripts. They made me, I thought it was a fun show to work on. So it did stand out to me because it was goofy. Some of the ones that I remember are not maybe the biggest franchises, but I remember them just because they were so off the wall, so different and wild and wacky.
That's
The more
fantastic.
standard good guy stranger comes into town, defeats the monsters stuff, I don't tend to remember very well because it seems to be thematic that happens in a lot of those shows. So they kind of blend in into the other for me, I'm afraid.
That's no problem at all, and that's just fantastic. And excuse me. Now, obviously, with having played across like many different roles across your career, where do you hope to see yourself with acting in the long run?
Well, I'm slowing down now. I purposely have slowed my career down because I can't keep up the pace that I used to uh, do. So I'm not retired, but I call myself semi-retired. I work before the pandemic. I was working about once or twice a week, going off and doing voice work, which was fun. That's all that I'm looking for now. I don't want to work 5 days a week any longer. So working once or twice a week suits me. Um, Again, I'm very invested in animal welfare work, and that's where a lot of my energy and time goes. Um, so the voice work, that's really all I envision is as long as, I'm going to knock on wood, as long as I have my health, and if they're still interested in hiring me, I've sort of graduated into the grandfather roles or the old mafioso leader role. You know, the stuff that suits voices that are 50 plus
Mm.
type roles. So there's less of them. They tend to be smaller roles, and that's all fine. To everything there is a season. I had my day playing lead roles and screaming and yelling and fighting and all these games. Now I'm happily content to be doing playing older characters, be they benign or evil or whatever in these roles. So that's all. If I can keep this going, as long as I have my health and keep focused, I'm still pretty good at it. When I go into studio, I'm quick and I'm professional and fast. They seem to like me. I get to meet younger directors all the time who are interested in hiring me, which is thrilling and fun for me to meet younger directors who know my work from when they were kids. Uh, yeah, that's about it. As long as I can keep rocking. I mean, if I can be doing this in my 80s or even 90s, then cool. That'd be great.
Fantastic.
Just again, just a couple times a week is all I need just to keep my hand in, and it's still fun.
Fantastic. And that's absolutely, and just keep going at it like that. Now, what's like one character or role that you've ever wanted to play or ever wished that you played?
Well, a lot of that is stage roles. The dreams I had of stage roles or on camera roles more than I can point to animation. I don't. I think jealousy and fear are two very negative things in anybody's life, but particularly in the acting world. And unfortunately, in our world, because you're hired daily, you don't have a 9 to 5. Fear can be, and even jealousy can rear their heads. So I don't look at what other actors are doing and get jealous and say, I wish I'd played that role, or oh, I didn't play the Joker. I wish I'd had a chance. I try not to go in that direction at all. I just look at what's put on my plate and try to do the best with what I have. I used to want to do a one-man show based on the comedian Lenny Bruce, who was long before your time, but he was a very groundbreaking comedian in the 50s and 60s who society essentially destroyed because he was so groundbreaking and anti-authority. I used to want to do a one-man show based on him and things like that. Uh, so most of my unfulfilled aspirations would lie in that direction as opposed to the voiceover world, to be honest. Um, I'm content with whatever, in voiceover, whatever appears before me. I'm happy to audition for if it's right for me. And I don't look around to see what I didn't get. Uh,
Fantastic. And I think that's really great to see in that sense as well. Which, speaking about, of course, with voice acting, what is your view on where the voice acting and animation industry stands within the entertainment industry?
well, anime certainly doesn't get the respect it deserves, nor the paycheck it deserves. I am working a little bit with a group here that is we the actors in the late 80s, early 90s created essentially the a union contract for dubbing. There was no union contract for it. We created it, but it needs to be upgraded again so that the actors get paid more money. So I am working a little bit with a group of actors here who are attempting to do that, just from the perspective of they wanted to have somebody older who'd been involved in the original uh, uh, putting together of that contract when it was first came into existence. Um, but the voiceover industry, of course, has grown immensely. I used to know pretty much every voice actor, probably 50% of the voice actors in LA. I knew them. And when it came to dubbing, it was hard to find people. We were scraping around. Can we find some dubbing actors, people who know how to do lip sync? Bear in mind, in those days, technically, we did not have the tools that we have now, so it was much more difficult to do dubbing in those days on tape. But anyway, now I go to these sites and these actors groups, and there's hundreds of them, thousands of them. They're everywhere. So it's grown immensely, and a lot of it is, gotten technically beyond my knowledge base and whatever. And there are young actors and performers who are raised in it, who are much more invested in it emotionally because they were raised in it. They got in it because they loved anime, whereas I kind of fell in it. But voiceover, it's almost too big to address the question because there is so much of it now. We've seen so many things coming out of the Disney studios and so many animated features that have become huge, huge money makers for them. And of course, that has also meant that stars, like I had a small role in Lilo and Stitch. I don't know that I could ever get a role in a major film again, animated film again, except maybe on the looping stage because the film actors take all the major roles now. So, with success, it becomes more competition and more scraping, and everybody has to have what I don't like these days, I'm rambling, but what I don't like these days, and a lot of the actors who are shy don't like it, is that everybody has to have an online presence now. Everybody has to be on Twitter, and everybody has to be on all these other media, constantly promoting themselves and putting themselves out there for people to see them. It wasn't that way when I was coming up. Nobody knew who we were. We were anonymous. And for some of the actors, that's very difficult when they're shy and they have to tweet every day and go on I don't even know what all these applications are, but they have to be everywhere all over the place. They have to go to conventions. A lot of them make their living primarily by going to conventions. It's just not for me. I've been to a few conventions and they were fun, but it's just not something that I do very often or plan on doing very often. So I can't speak to a lot of it because I've only got the 1 foot in it, where I'm the older guy that they bring in and hire, but I'm not connected to the pulse of it. And it's changed so much that the industry is almost like a stranger to me. It's an entirely different world than it was when I began. I began working in 1982 full time in the industry. So how many years is that? Long time. So it's a different world.
I think that's fantastic, and I definitely agree on that in that sense, for that matter. In as you mentioned about before, like the industry has changed so much in that point in time, and for myself as a fan, really, that when and I'm not trying to inflate my own ego or anything when I say this, but whenever I go to a lot of comic conventions, people often ask me, why do you go to, like, people would ask me, like, why do you go to comic conventions? Like, who do you go to meet there? And I say, I go to meet the voice actors. That's primarily the reason there. I see them as my rock stars right there. So, and to me, like, and people have been asking me about over the last few years, when I first started doing HannaTalk, my podcast, which has now been 5 years since I've started doing this. I've started it for the reason of supporting the animation industry and the voice acting industry, getting people knowing about all these incredible actors that have done such fantastic projects, and I feel like need to have the recognition they deserve, and that this industry needs the recognition it deserves, really.
Well, certainly there are some wonderful actors and some great performances that that are put together. And a lot of these actors, like myself, at least some of the older ones, came out of stage acting. Karen Strassman has a great on-camera career. She's an amazing actress. There are some terrific performers, amazing performers, who don't just do voice work too. They are capable of doing all kinds of other acting. Marcelo Tubert is always, I don't know if you know him, but he's always doing theater. He does more looping, I guess, than he does anime or animation, but also a great performer. There's so many wonderful performers. So yeah, it's nice for them to, if they wanted, to get the recognition. Um, for some of us, like myself, when I go to conventions and whatnot, it's not for me. I don't really need the recognition. I don't. It's nice to get it on a one-on-one basis, like as I say when I meet a young person, or I was at USC, University of Southern California, visiting a young girl there, a young lady that I'm helping, and she introduced me to her friends and said, "Doug's an anime actor." And he was in there, and they all went, "Oh my goodness!" You know, so I had all these little sort of teenage girls crowded around me getting pictures, whatever. And it was very cute that they got all excited. But I can't do that every day. Maybe I'm more of an introvert. Um, I like when people enjoy the performances. If I bump into somebody and they tell me that they saw or heard something I did and they enjoyed it, I'm thrilled. I was thrilled when it was stage acting. I'm thrilled when it was voice acting, if they enjoyed my performance. But I don't want a fan club. I don't want to, I'm not comfortable, very comfortable at conventions with crowds of people, et cetera, et cetera. So it's great for those that can be comfortable. If they're comfortable with it, that's great. For me, I'm happy to do a podcast when I'm asked. I'm happy to do it and talk about the work, but it's not something I'm fame or being well known isn't something I'm particularly seeking. Uh, uh, if somebody sends me something and says they want an autograph, I always happy to oblige. I ask them for a small contribution to the shelter, to the animal shelter, to make a financial contribution to the shelter, and I'll sign whatever they send and send it back. Happy to do it, but it's just again not something I'm seeking. For
Right.
me, it's the work. I just enjoy the work,
I think
and
that's fantastic.
anything else is just icing.
I think that's just fantastic to see that. And I think that's also what I think for anybody for that matter who's part of like whether it's acting or voice acting or in the entertainment industry, they need to have that kind of mindset right there in saying like, like are you doing it for the love? Are you doing it for fame and
Mm-hmm.
fortune? That's something I think we all need to ask ourselves in this industry. And I think we need to keep in mind about that. And I think it's fantastic that you see that's what you see yourself in from at this point in your career, and it's fantastic.
Well, I always felt like I was a blue collar actor. I was never a star, and that's fine. I never set out to be. When I got into stage work and on camera work, I wanted to be a character actor. I wanted to be that guy who could work until he was 70 or 80 or 90, because he wasn't the handsome hero. He was the interesting guy. He was the comedic guy, or the killer, or the henchman, or the whatever. To me, those were the fun roles. That's why I liked Alec Guinness, who could play. Excuse me. He could play anything. He was like a
Fantastic.
chameleon.
Absolutely. And that's fantastic. Now, without getting into any spoilers, what's next for Doug Stone for the fans to know about?
Oh gosh, I really don't have anything to promote. Because of the pandemic, everything is slowed down in the past 6 weeks. Um, I've been doing a lot of dubbing. Most of the dubbing work I've been doing hasn't been anime, but it's been for Netflix shows, live action shows uh, that I've been doing a lot of at various studios for different directors. So that it's nothing particularly that I don't think anime fans would be that interested in. I wouldn't imagine. And the other things that I'm working on currently, we have to sign non-disclosure agreements until
Hmm,
these things are released. So uh, I'm just going to go online here
no problem.
and go to my own page for a moment. Uh, Doug Stone Manx Mouse. Oh my God! Flashback to the past. When I type in my name, the oddest things come up sometimes
It's
from old shows. But I'm just going to the IMDb to remind myself of uh, there are a couple of games out. Let's see, Altered Carbon, um, Bow Islands is a game that I just worked on. Propagation VR Stage 3 is a video game I worked on. Tangle Tower was a fun game that I actually recorded from home for a British company. Tangle Tower is a video game, and they wanted to reach out to get some American actors, and so I played I thought was a really fun character, a very pompous, full of himself, very obese type of fellow who thinks he's much more than he is. He's quite taken with himself. There's nothing you've done that I haven't done better. That sort of fellow. So he was a lot of fun. Fire Emblem, Three Houses. I played a couple of roles, Gilbert and Agar. And then we're going back to One Punch Man and RBUK, Backdoor Girls, etc. So those are the ones that are the more recent shows
fantastic.
and games that I did. And again, this thing I've done. There's been so many different shows. It's like I say, a little role in Lilo and Stitch, and we did the first interstitials for when Fox TV started. They were doing a show called Dynamo Duck, where they took live action little animals and made it into a detective show. So I was writing scripts and voicing on that, and it was a Dan Castellaneta. I can never pronounce his name correctly. The guy who does Homer Simpson.
Wow.
He played the lead character of Dynamo Duck, and we were all his fellow characters. But it's all these stories and things. Hank Azaria, who you may know from The Simpsons, used to be in an improv troupe. I used to teach improvisational acting, and Hank was in my class when he was about 21, and I got him. He was so good, I got him into two of my groups. And while we were doing our show here in LA in the late 80s, is when the Simpsons people came to see him, and that's when he got hired. And he was saying to us, I don't know what this is. It's some sort of interstitial for the Tracy Ullman show called The Simpsons. But anyway, they want me to voice on it, so we'll see what happens. And then, of course, he took off from there. It became the huge hit series that it was.
Fantastic.
So there's lots of stories and events that have happened and people you meet and Harrison Ford and so many Ed Asner. Trying to remember all the names. Who was in Silence of the Lambs?
Anthony Hopkins?
Yeah, I met Anthony Hopkins at Sony. So I've met a lot of different people over the years on sound stages and elsewhere that I've gotten to chat with a little bit, and so it's been interesting because outside of the voiceover world, I've met some interesting on camera people as well. Some of whom were doing voice work, some of whom we just stumbled upon. Like I say, Mel Brooks, the crazy Mel Brooks I'd see around Sony all the time, and then he ended up directing me in something one time, which didn't get released, unfortunately. But he was a madman, but a lot of fun. I missed meeting Max von Sydow by half an hour because I was dubbing a film that he had done, Pele the Conqueror, in the 1980s. Wonderful actor, known to American audiences as well as European audiences. But anyway, yeah, it's been an adventure ride.
Fantastic. And the adventure
38-year adventure ride.
That's fantastic. And the adventure is still continuing. So that's just absolutely fantastic. And final question, what do you think Psycho Mantis would say if he was in Australia?
What would Psycho say if he was in Australia? I'm trying to remember Psycho's voice. It's been a long time. I can read your mind. I have a cold. Let it be cold, or you will pay. Something like that. You will rue the day you messed with Psycho Mantis. That is meant to be a pun on rue, of course.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. That is fantastic. Doug
I
Stone.
had to try to do it, Ozzy, when I did that, when I was doing voiceover. When I did Return to the Blue Lagoon, my Aussie's very, very rusty. It's been a long time, mate. So it's
Wow.
not very good. But it's been a long time since. It has been a long time, and if you do not practice your accents, they will get away from you. They will escape immediately. You cannot retrieve them so instantly.
That's
Unless you've been doing
fantastic.
them a lot, more recently, you'll forget the way they sound. And so your pompous English might not sound quite as pompous as you intended to be. So
Wow. That's fantastic. That is absolutely wonderful. Doug Stone, thank you so much. It's been an honor.
oh, my pleasure, mate.
Absolutely. And is there anything you would like to say to the fans out there in Australia and in the world?
Actually, if I can go off topic slightly, again, I volunteer for a no-kill cat rescue. Spade and fix your animals, and practice trap, neuter, return, and get all those animals out in the street fixed, so they won't keep having babies out in the street. Save those ferals. So that's just a humane message I'll send out for all my little animal friends out there, because I am heavily invested in that as well emotionally, and spend a lot of my time in animal rescue. So,
Fantastic.
other than that, just keep listening, keep enjoying. Thank you for your interest, and thank you for honoring me by feeling my work is interesting enough to keep listening to.
Absolutely. That is fantastic. Well, guys, if you'd like to find out more about Doug Stone, you can check out the links which I'll put to in the description below once this interview is put up. And don't forget to subscribe to HannaTalk as well as my other links below in the description. Thank you all so much for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy. This is Simon and Doug Stone signing off. Bye for now.